You've done it again. You're standing right in front of someone you've met at least twice, maybe 3 times, and their name is simply gone. Not hovering at the edge of your memory, not hiding somewhere close, just absent, like it was never stored anywhere to begin with. And the worst part isn't the forgetting, it's the next 10 seconds of completely improvised social performance you're about to put on. Casually glancing around the room, hoping someone nearby says their name first. Wondering if the universe will intervene and make their phone ring. We've all been there. But the people who live here, who chronically and consistently forget names, are not careless. They are not rude. And they are almost certainly not as careless as they've been quietly made to feel. There's something very specific happening in their brains, and once you understand it, you'll never carry that guilt the same way again. Here's where it starts. The moment you meet someone new, your brain is doing an enormous amount of work all at once. It's reading their face, registering their tone, calculating the social context, figuring out whether this person likes you, whether you like them, what you're supposed to say next, and how you're coming across while you say it. Your working memory, the short-term processing space in your prefrontal cortex, is essentially juggling 6 things simultaneously. And into that exact storm of mental activity, someone hands you one single arbitrary sound, their name. Hi, I'm Jason. Jason. Okay, Jason doesn't mean anything. It doesn't connect to anything you already know. It doesn't trigger an image, a concept, a feeling, or a memory. It just sits there, completely isolated, in a brain that is honestly too overwhelmed to babysit it. Psychologists have a name for why this happens. In 1987, researchers McWeeny and Ellis published a study demonstrating what became known as the Baker-Baker paradox. They showed participants a photo and told one group the person was a baker by profession. They told a separate group the same person's last name was Baker. Days later, the people who learned the occupation remembered it far more easily. Same word, completely different retention, because the word baker as a job activates an entire web of associations. Flour, bread, early mornings, warmth, the smell of something coming out of an oven. As a name, it activates nothing. It floats there, rootless. Names are semantically empty by design. And your brain, efficient machine that it is, holds on to things that carry meaning. Think about the last difficult conversation you had. You probably remember the specific look on the other person's face, the exact words that landed hard, the feeling that sat in your chest afterward. You do not remember what you were wearing that day because your brain made a decision, without consulting you, about what mattered. Names are what you were wearing. Everything else about a person is the conversation. But here's where it gets more personal than most people want to admit. A significant portion of people who chronically forget names are deeply inside their own heads during social interactions, not from arrogance, but from something closer to the opposite. While someone is introducing themselves, these people are running an entire internal audit. Am I making enough eye contact? Did I just interrupt? Is this handshake too firm? Is my expression reading as engaged or bored? The name enters the room briefly, and then the internal monologue runs straight over it. This is actually documented. There's a phenomenon called the next-in-line effect, first observed by psychologist Malcolm Brenner in 1973. People waiting to speak in a group showed dramatically reduced memory for what the person directly before them said. Why? Because mentally they had already moved on, already preparing, already editing themselves in real time. And people who carry social anxiety, or even just a heightened self-awareness, live in that mode almost permanently, never fully here, always half a step ahead into what comes next. Which means the moment a name is actually offered, they're already somewhere else. If that's you, here's the reframe. You don't have a memory problem. You have a preoccupation problem. Those are very different things. And here's what nobody tells you about the people who forget names most consistently. They tend to be highly associative thinkers. Their memory is rich, textured, contextual. They remember stories. They remember the look on someone's face when they said something that mattered. Ask them what someone was wearing at a gathering 2 years ago, and they might actually tell you. Ask them the name of the person standing next to them in that same memory, and you'll get a blank, because their brain was cataloging everything except the label. This isn't a flaw in how they're wired. It's a particular architecture, one that is better suited to emotional attunement, to deep listening, to the kind of attention that makes people feel genuinely understood, and less suited to the specific mechanical task of holding and filing an arbitrary sound under social pressure. There's also something worth saying about the people on the other end of this. The ones whose names get forgotten, because the emotional sting is real, and it would be dishonest to pretend otherwise. Having your name forgotten, especially more than once, lands like a small but pointed message. You didn't matter enough to stick. That's what it feels like, even when it's completely wrong. Even when the person who forgot your name spent the next hour thinking about the thing you said, remembering the specific way you laughed, carrying the actual texture of who you are with them the whole time. They were there. They just weren't there for the name part. And this is the thing about memory that most people fundamentally misunderstand. It is not a recording. Your brain does not store experiences the way a drive stores files. It stores impressions, emotions, patterns, fragments, and it prioritizes ruthlessly. High emotion, stored. Surprising, stored. Connected to something you already know, stored. One arbitrary syllable offered to you at the exact moment you were busy trying to seem normal in front of a stranger. Good luck. There's even something worth noting here from people who've found clever ways around this. Some people in high-contact environments, teachers, bartenders, anyone who meets dozens of new faces at once, quietly develop their own systems. They use universal nicknames. They create associations on the fly. One commenter once pointed out that in the military, everyone wore their name on their chest, and the social ease that created was almost immediate. The stress of remembering simply vanished, and with it, a particular kind of low-grade anxiety that most name forgetters carry without ever naming it. None of this means you can't get better at it. Repeating someone's name back to them when you first hear it, connecting it to a face you already know, building a small associative bridge between that name and something already in your mental landscape. These approaches work. They work because you are doing manually what your brain refuses to do automatically. You are constructing meaning where there wasn't any. You are essentially giving Kevin a reason to exist in your memory, something to attach to, somewhere to live. But the shame that comes with this, the quiet, persistent belief that forgetting names makes you someone who moves through the world without really seeing other people. That part is simply not true. And it's worth saying clearly, because a lot of people carry it for years without ever questioning where it came from. You are not absent. You are not dismissive. You are someone whose brain prioritizes differently, gets pulled into its own current, and sometimes fails at the single least interesting thing about a person. The arbitrary sound their parents chose before they'd done a single thing worth remembering. The name was always the least of it. What you remember about people, the real stuff, the weight of who they actually are, that part has been there the whole time. If that hit close to home, please subscribe. There's a lot more of this to explore. I've got some other videos that go just as deep into how your mind actually works. Different angles, same kind of clarity. I'll see you in the next one.